the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello and welcome back to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast team by team preview series here. And our next stop, we are heading to Carolina. But before we do, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Now, last season, the Carolina Panthers, they finished the season at 7-10, which was a bit of a success in itself considering where they're coming from. They scored 347 points, but they surrendered 374. That was a negative 27 when it comes to that points differential. Now, on offense, they had the 29th ranked passing offense, averaging 176.2 yards per contest, while their run offense was 10th in the league, averaging 130 yards. Defensively, their pass defense was giving up 227.5 yards per game there. That was the 22nd best in the league, while their run defense ranked 18th, yielding 122.6. Now, when we take a closer look at the Carolina Panthers season, it all came down to week number 17, when Carolina would travel down to Tampa Bay with the division title and a postseason berth on the line. Unfortunately, the fairy tale season did not come to a happy ending, as the Panthers would end up losing to Brady and the Bucs 30-24. One thing that the Panthers needed to do was find a way to string together some wins after starting the season losing 7 of their first 8 contests. The rest of the NFC South, they would also have to be bad. Well, both those things kind of occurred. Carolina would finish the season there, winning 5 of the last 8 contests. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers, they were the team that qualified for the playoffs with an 8-9 record. So Carolina was right there in the playoff thick of things, despite not having a good start to the season. So obviously what needs to happen is going to have to be Carolina getting off to a good start this season. We'll talk about more of what Carolina needs to do a little bit later. But let's talk about what needs to happen here during camp and the battles that we are watching. The first battle that you have to watch, Terrace Marshall versus Jonathan Mingle for the wide receiver 3 role in this offense. Carolina must be getting tired of waiting for Marshall to be a thing. I know for fantasy, he's been a fantasy sleeper in each of his first 2 seasons. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I will not get fooled a third time. Yet here we are, entering 2023, and the hype machine is once again picking up where it left off last offseason. And Terrace Marshall, to his credit, has been making ridiculous catches pretty much look routine through OTAs. Bryce Young, he is now under center, and people are reminded that PFF gave Marshall a 97.1 grade on go routes in 2022. Now, Mingo, he is the guy who's got the athleticism, number 2 athleticism score, thanks to that size and speed combination. But why can I not shake this feeling that Jonathan Mingo is essentially Terrace Marshall all over again? Now, we talked about Mingo and he was a big part of this draft class. So was Bryce Young. Bryce Young went 101 there to the Panthers, followed by pick 39 was Jonathan Mingo. In the 3rd round, the Carolina Panthers would select edge rusher DJ Johnson. In the 4th round, guard Chandler Zavala. And in the 5th round, Jamie Robinson there at pick number 145. Now, they didn't have the capital after making that big move to go get Bryce Young. They sent plenty of picks Chicago's way in order to select Bryce Young. That is what Carolina did via the draft. But what do they do during free agency? Who do they add? Who do they lose? Well, let's talk about that here for a second. Those additions include running back Miles Sanders, safety Von Bell, quarterback Andy Dalton, defensive tackle Shai Tuttle there, tight end Hayden Hurst, defensive end Deshaun Williams, guard Justin McCrary, wide receiver Adam Thielen, and wide receiver DJ Chark. Now, the losses, obviously, DJ Moore, who went in that trade to Chicago to acquire that first overall selection in Bryce Young. They also lost Donta Foreman, center Pat Eflin, linebacker Damian Wilson, quarterback Sam Darnold, and PJ Walker. So digging in a little bit deeper here in those additions, whether it be the draft or free agency, what was the best move that the Panthers made? Signing Adam Thielen. You made a move to get your franchise quarterback, but you paid a hefty price in doing so. You lost one of the best pass catchers your organization has ever seen. Thielen, he comes to Carolina with a history of being a security blanket who works on those short and intermediate areas of the field. He will not only be a trusted target for a rookie quarterback, but also offer some late round fantasy appeal, especially in those PPR leagues. As for the worst move for the Carolina Panthers, Again, you paid a big price to acquire Bryce Young, but if he ends up being what he's meant to be, then everyone's going to forget exactly how much you paid to get him. Carolina, they did go out there and grab themselves some solid players in Thielen, Miles Sanders, Hayden Hurst. They drafted Jonathan Mingle, yet this wide receiver room still feels like there's work that needs to be done. Look, the Bears, they addressed their quarterback situation there by adding DJ Moore to Justin Fields. Philadelphia, they brought in A.J. Brown to help out Jalen Hurts. We can look at what Buffalo did in bringing Stephon Diggs in to help Josh Allen. All those moves were there to help young quarterbacks take that next step. Carolina doesn't have that alpha wide receiver. As much as I like Adam Thielen, he's not there to help Bryce Young take that next step. Jonathan Mingle is not that type of receiver who's going to help elevate Bryce Young to that next level. So for me, Carolina kind of missed it there. If you're going to get yourself a young franchise quarterback, get himself a top-end alpha-type wide receiver. Now, what needs to happen for Carolina to have success here in 2023? They need to build off of last season. They need to get those wins early on in the year. All four teams in this NFC South division have a shot at the postseason. Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans are all better teams today than they were in January. Tampa Bay, they still have some solid pieces on their roster. Now, Carolina must look to win those key divisional contests there. Last season, 4-2. That was why they were so close at the end. That's why they finished at 7-10. They took care of business inside the division, and they're going to have to pick up where they left off a season ago, which is no easy task when you have a rookie under center. Now, when we talk about that rookie, we have to talk about the top 5 fantasy assets for a Carolina team that is looking to reach a 9-8 record, which I've got them predicted to doing here in 2023. So let's take a look at the top 5 fantasy assets for the Carolina Panthers. And that all starts at number 1. Young practices like he plays, and he has been throwing with some zip throughout camp. He also possesses the ability to run, which makes him even more dangerous. Basically, even if he has a bad game throwing the ball, he's going to make up for it in fantasy with his legs. At number 2, speaking of legs, Miles Sanders. Sure, the Eagles had the best offensive line last season, but Sanders, he still had a pretty large part of playing in rushing for the 5th most yards last season. Philadelphia, they didn't use Sanders as a pass-catching back, but going back to his rookie season, remember, Sanders caught 50 balls there for 509 yards. At number 3, baby Chark, it's DJ Chark. Chark is a boom and bust play each and every week. A healthy Chark last season with the Lions had an ADOT of 15.7 that resulted in 1.67 yards per route run. Chark is a deep threat, and Young's passer rate on deep passes last season at Alabama, 95.8. At number 4, it's that security blanket there, Adam Thielen, who has quickly become one of Young's favorite targets throughout OTAs. Thielen is that security blanket in the middle, and because he is that trusted target, he's going to be a solid contributor in PPR formats. And finally, at number 5, the rookie, Jonathan Mingle. Carolina, they used a 2nd-round draft selection there to pair up Mingle with Bryce Young in this year's draft. The Ole Miss product was the 5th receiver selected in the 2023 NFL draft. Mingle is a freak athlete with special abilities, especially after the catch. Basically, he turns like into a running back once the ball is in his hands in the open field. He's got quick acceleration, and he's in and out of cuts in a blink of an eye. So now that you know the top 5 fantasy assets for this Carolina Panthers, let's talk about some fantasy implications. Who is that one player that you need to add from the Carolina Panthers? It's Miles Sanders. You know, that dude that was just 5th in the league in rushing a season ago. I know that Eagles line was good, but so was Miles Sanders. Let's put a little bit of respect on his name. We criminally underrate him year in and year out. We know he can run the ball. However, one thing that was missing was that pass-catching ability, and we haven't seen that since that rookie year. Sanders, he isn't Christian McCaffrey. No one's expecting him to be Christian McCaffrey, but he'll be used more as a pass catcher there in Carolina than he recently was in Philadelphia. And when both McCaffrey and Dante Foreman moved on, so did 288 carries and 50-plus targets. None of these Panthers players are being drafted that high. Sanders is literally the highest drafted Panther here with an ADP of 51, which is RB 21, give or take. And I'm not going to call it a bust, but I refuse to listen to the noise that it's coming out of camp in regards to Terrace Marshall. Maybe we get that 3rd-year breakout. That would be nice. It would justify some of the nice things that I had said about him in the past before he made a fool out of me. And I don't forget things. I'm like an elephant when it comes to fantasy football. Young is going to need to lean on Thielen, lean on Hayden Hurst. Those are going to be his security blankets. DJ Chark is going to be the guy that he looks for when he releases the ball deep. Laviska Shenault, he's going to have that role as that gadget guy. Who is saving Terrace Marshall? I don't know. I just don't see what his role in this team is going to be. And the best fantasy value for Carolina, Adam Thielen coming off the board as wide receiver 55. And I'm hearing on these Twitter streets that he's basically washed. Maybe he is. Maybe he is. It's a very strong possibility that he is washed. That's why the Minnesota Vikings said, hey, we ain't paying you. You can kind of move on here. Or maybe he was hurt most of last season, which hurt those numbers. And now being surrounded by all these young pass catchers basically rejuvenated him. Not to mention Bryce Young there. I mean, he's kind of a guy, hey, if I know I got Bryce Young throwing me the ball, maybe more so than Kirk Cousins, I'm going to be a little bit more excited to get on out there. I'm not expecting wide receiver 1 or even wide receiver 2 type numbers, but in 2021, despite injury shorting his season, he averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game and was wide receiver 26 while missing 4 games. Even last season, he was wide receiver 30 and averaged over 10 fantasy points per game. If you're looking for a sleeper, because we all want a sleeper, we all want to hit in those late rounds because those are the guys that make the difference, right? Well, how deep do you want to go? Now, this running back position, it dries up pretty quickly when it comes to fantasy drafts, and you may want to consider pairing Miles Sanders with Canadian Chuba Hubbard. Of course, I had to get some Canadian reference in there. We already talked about all these opportunities in this Carolina Panthers backfield, those 288 carries, those 50 targets. That's all gone. And Chuba Hubbard last season, he made the most of his opportunities, averaging 4.9 yards per carry on his way to 455 yards on the ground. Hubbard was also explosive in those limited opportunities in the passing game, averaging 12.2 yards per catch on 17 targets. While Miles Sanders is going to receive most of those opportunities, Hubbard will certainly make a case to get more involved in this offense. The Panthers as a team don't have much top-end talent when it comes to fantasy, but what they do have is some nice pieces that can be drafted later on in those fantasy drafts, and they have a lot of upside with very little risk. So you can feel good about Carolina where those draft picks are coming here later on, because Carolina is going to give you some value later in your draft.